My name is Eldon Leon Miller.
And Eldon, what's your earliest memory?
Yeah, that's a problem I have is my memory's not as good as it used to be. But I do remember I remember I lived in a coal camp housing unit, and I remember going up and play in the rocks and everything. And then I came down and I had something to tell you. My earliest memory. Well, I guess that was probably one of my. I did a lot of playing up in the mountains and climbing the ledges, and just one day I got up on a little area on the ledge, and I couldn't turn around, so I could go back down. And as a result, I started yelling, and finally some guys came up and helped me down.
What state was that?
What?
Where was that at? Where'd you grow up?
This was in a place called Spring Canyon. It's in Carbon County, Utah.
Okay. So is that where you grew up? Most of your childhood was in Carbon County?
Carbon and Emery.
Emery County.
Yeah. My dad, whenever the contract that he was working at ended, then he had to get another job with another coal camp or coal mine. And as a result, we were moving, and I was in 3 different schools in 1 year.
Wow.
That's how often we changed. But most of the time, a lot of the times, we were able to make it through.
What was the home like that you grew up in?
They had, like I said, I grew up in well, the one I remember best was my grandmother's house. And it was down in Emery County in the town of Clawson. And my bedroom was a whole downstairs.
Oh, nice.
The upstairs had enough bedrooms for the girls and my mom and dad and etc. So they put me downstairs, and in fact, part of the downstairs had dirt floor. I didn't have any flooring in yet, but the other part did. And so that's where I lived several different times.
What was your childhood like or the neighborhood or friends or?
Well, they would have free movies for various coal camps at various times, and what was your question again?
What was the neighborhood like you grew up in, or your friends? Okay. What were they like?
So if one coal camp business had housing there, we would move into that. But the one that I remember best was my grandmother's house, which was built by my uncles for her, and it was down in Clawson, and that was a place that I just really enjoyed growing up in that area.
About how big was the town of Clawson?
The same as it is now, about Clawson. How big was it? Huh. Well, there was probably about about 20 houses in that town, and several of the houses would be used for a little while, and then those people would move out to another job, in another coal camp. And so that's what happened with us a lot of times.
Did you have any traditions or customs growing up that you found important?
I remember going to the movies a couple of times, and to see the movies that it was called Our Gang, and it was about teenage boys and what they did as a group. And so whenever we Spring Canyon boys or Clawson boys would go down to Price, the big the town, what's it called, in it was in we'd go down. We lived in a coal camp, and when we go down to Price, which is the biggest city around that area, and that was very big. Whenever we went down there, if they, in the movies, Our Gang and the East Side Boys and etc. It tells about these boys, that did things as a group, and they took advantage of a lot of people and etc. Anyway, what was I telling you about?
When you guys would all go down to Price?
Oh yeah, okay. Whenever we go down singly or with just 2 or 3 of us, and we would always thumb a ride to get down there. Whenever we got down there, if a gang of boys saw us, they'd come up and say, "Where are you guys from?" And maybe push us around a little bit. And so we would tell them that we were from a bigger town. We'd say, "Well, we're from Help," which is the next biggest town there. And so then they treated us a little nice, but if they thought we were from one of the coal camps, they took advantage of us. A lot of us would be talking, and all of a sudden we found ourselves tripped over somebody who was bent down behind us, and somebody else pushed him down or something like that. And so it was kind of an interesting.
Kind of rougher times.
What?
Kind of rougher times back then.
Yeah, it was. It was just different, than here and now.
Yeah. Did you have any role models or heroes when you were growing up?
Well, I really did. Most of them were movie stars, and my older brothers, they normally didn't live with us. They would have a job working somewhere else, or the people that they were living with would hire them to do herd cows or something like that, Anyway, we would always, whenever a gang of boys had come up to us and start talking to us, they were real nice until they found out that we were the truth about us. Then they'd start pushing us around and twisting our ears and things like that, and so we would usually tell them that we were from one of the bigger towns.
Right.
And anyway.
Any other notable stories that you want to share from your childhood or teenage years that?
Well, one of the things we did was we'd go from door to door and ask if they had any empty beer bottles, something like that, because we could take them down to the store and get some money for them. I when we would move down to Clawson, which was a farming community, that made me feel good because then I was a cowboy, because I'd herd cows and things like that, and we had some interesting things with the herding cows. I remember getting on one and riding it around, and we had to do something to because otherwise we just stay out there and watch the cows and then run down and chase them out of one field onto another or whatever.
Sounds like you learned how to work hard as a young kid.
To do what?
To work hard.
Well, yes, and I also learned how to get out of work too.
So what was your first job then?
Well, let me tell you another thing real quickly.
Yeah.
My sister was 14 months younger than me, and our job was to do the dishes all the time for each meal and everything. And we would take turns washing dishes. It would be my turn to wash dishes for a week, and then Beverly would wash them the next week. But I would wash them, and she would dry them and put them away, you know. And so I found one time that when I was washing dishes, I had all these pots and pans. Wondered where they came from, and for 2 days I wondered it, and then I saw what was happening. When it was Beverly's turn to do the pots and pans, she would hide them somewhere until it was my turn, and then she'd bring them out. So I'd do them. Well, when I told my mother about it, she said, "Well, don't tell her, don't say anything. Just go ahead and do what you're doing, and I'll take care of it." And so the week that I was washing dishes, my mother watched from the side, you know, where Beverly couldn't see her looking, and saw what Beverly was doing. And from that, and then she went into her and she said, "Beverly, I see what you're doing." And Beverly said, "Oh, no, I didn't. I saw you." Anyway, the point is, and so what's going to happen is Eldon's not going to help you with the dishes at all for a whole week. You have to wash and dry them. And so that did away with that.
That's pretty good.
Yeah.
So how many siblings did you have then?
Well, I had a younger sister. She was about 5 years younger than Beverly and I. And then we had two other, there was one boy and another girl. So there was 2 girls and a boy younger than me. Then my older brothers, they were a lot older. They joined the CCCs, or they'd get a job and move away, you know, from the house and etc. And so I would hardly ever see them.
So once you grew up, I guess, or as you were in high school, maybe, what was your first job you got?
I got a job washing dishes and making beds in the little town of Spring Canyon, and so I did those things for the coal miners, and I got some. they paid me a little bit, for doing those things. And so my first job was doing dishes and things like that. And then my next job, I stopped doing this one and this one because one of them hired me to set the tables and take the dirty dishes off, and so my first job was helping clean up the dining room and do the dishes and things like that.
Okay. And so, what did you end up doing for your career?
Well, the first thing I did was when I got old enough, I joined the Utah National Guard, and I started doing military stuff, and I ended up spending a little over 20 years in the Army Reserve and the National Guard. And so my first job, I would guess, would be working for the U.S. government as a serviceman.
How'd you decide to do that?
Well, I knew what they did by the time I got ready to do it, and so and then I became in charge of all of the Utah National Guard guys that was doing them in each town, that they were doing them. I was, my job would be to go and check on them, see how they were doing and everything.
What were some of the biggest challenges you faced in your career?
Well, I had to buy my own uniforms and everything, and I was in the process of growing up and out and whatever, and so my clothes didn't always fit me, and so I decided I'd join where they furnished my uniforms and whatever. So I can't remember what I was called, but anyway, I was in the Utah National Guard, and they told me what I had to do and whatever.
So did you enjoy your career with the National Guard and the Army?
Yeah, I must have, because I did go in the Army, and I spent 20 years in the Army and got retirement. I got retirement from the Utah National Guard and the Army, and well, I had another one. I had 3 incomes from retirement.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and so I became rich.
And when you started with the National Guard and the Army, I imagine, did you travel around a lot? Or?
Oh yeah, when I ended up going to North Korea, and my job there was going down to the various communities and talking to the I don't know what they're called, but anyway, my job was to go down and show them how a democracy worked as opposed to what they were doing.
Okay.
And so my job was to help establish a democratic type.
In North Korea?
Yeah.
Was that like after the Korean War?
No, it was before the Korean War. In fact, I went to South Korea to help them with get to know more about a democratic type government, you know, for a city and a county and whatever. And what was your question to me now?
So what was I was asking just about your time in Korea and whether it was before or after the war and what you did there.
Okay. So I was in North Korea, and then I went down to South Korea, and then I left and I went to China and Japan, and as a result, when I left Korea, that's when the Korean War started.
Well,
And I tell everybody that the reason it started there is because I left and they, you know,
couldn't keep up with it?
Yeah.
What were the people like in North Korea and South Korea?
Some were kind of quiet, didn't do much talking, but most of them it was really nice, and I made some friends and etc. here, there, and the other place.
So after I guess your time in Asia, did you end up still abroad, or did you come back to the States after that?
I think most of my full-time missionary stuff was in the Korean and China and another country. Anyway, I worked in those countries, and then I don't know if there's stuff in here. Yeah, places I've lived. 29 different places that I've lived.
Wow.
And this tells a lot about it. But the place I liked best was the little town of Clawson. And this is the house that I lived in down there most of the time when I wasn't living with a farmer on their farms, you know, to
Right.
help them out.
So I heard you mention missionary. Were you a missionary at one point?
No, not really, but I kept wanting to be, and so when I would get a chance, I would talk about the gospel.
Okay, that's awesome. So, what about a spouse or partner? Did you meet Did you have a wife eventually?
Oh, yeah, I actually had one wife, and she and I lived together 22 years, and she passed away. And then about a year and a half after that, I married another woman, and she lived we lived together, and she and I lived together for about 25 years, and then she died. And then one day, after she died, I started going with this other girl, and you know, we'd go and do things together and whatever. And one day I said to her, you know, honey, we're always together. We ought to go ahead and get married. She said, no, I'm not marrying you. And I says, what do you mean you're not marrying me? Don't you love me? I sure do, but I'm not marrying you. And I says, why? She says, I know what happened to your first two wives. They died, and I don't want to died by marrying you. So I was only married twice, and each one was a little over 20 years. So
Those are both really long marriages. How did you meet each wife? Let's start with your first wife. How did you guys meet?
I thought, oh, there's
Yeah,
that's
the
right
cleaning.
here. How did we meet? Well, it was, I did go to college also, and I got my doctorate in education, and that's another story, but I ought to tell you about one thing about that. But so now the question is, how did I meet them?
Yep. How'd you meet?
Yeah, well, it was the first wife. I think I just met her when we were going to church, and we would sit together and things like that. And that was how I met my first wife, by going with her, and we were both active in the church. And then the second wife, I already knew her, and so when my first wife died, my second wife to be and I started going together more, and then we ended up getting married. And it's interesting because, like I said, over less than a 50-year period of time, I had two wives, 20 years together, each one, so it was just the way it turned out,
Did you have any kids?
Yeah, sure did. I have to stop and think. 3. This was from my second wife. I had 3 girls and 2 boys.
All from your second wife?
Yeah.
So you had 5 kids in total?
Yeah.
We'll jump back to them here in a minute, but you mentioned that you went to school and got a doctorate degree?
Yeah, I found out being in the Army that I wish my memory was a little better. Anyway, the point is that I went to school, to college, and I got my degree. And first I got my degree from high school, from working, in the Army and etc., and going part-time to school. And then I decided I could get some money by going to school without working extra. And so I did that. And that's how I got through college, the first bit. And then the second thing I did is I was helping people learn about the GI Bill and what they could do in this. And so I decided I'd take advantage of some of the advantages that they did have. And so I was able to go to college, and I went back to New York State College, and got my degree. No, I got my first degree. Was in Carbon County, or Utah National Guard, and then what was the question again?
About your degrees and all the degrees
well, anyway,
you got.
I got one degree by going to college at Carbon Junior High, Carbon Junior College in Price, Utah, and then I went to Penn State, Pennsylvania State, and got my other degree. And then New York, anyway, I went to several schools back east and got some of the others, but then I came back and finished off some of the stuff in Carbon College and then the Utah State. I can't remember, but anyway, I got my
Your doctorate.
I think it's all in this book right here, and I can't remember. Anyway, I got. Oh, incidentally, I worked in the coal mine for 4 years too. I had a real good job there. My job was I was called a nipper, and my job was to connect the coal cars to the little motor that would take them, the little, well, it was a motorized vehicle, and they would pull the empty cars in the mine, and when they got all filled up, then they'd take them out. And anyway, my job was to take the my job was to see that the cars were all connected, and the motor man, I'd give him a signal and he'd take them out, and then he'd bring the empties in, and I'd help them do whatever had to be done.
So were you loading and unloading the cars, or just making sure that they were all connected together?
What was the first part?
Were you helping them load and unload the cars?
No. All my job was to make sure that they were connected together right, and if they have 15 or 20 empty cars I had a light on, where we could see.
Yeah.
And so I would go like this for a certain time to tell him what's had to be, come back or go or whatever.
A signal to him. Well, that's pretty interesting.
Yeah, it was a good job, but I had to sit around for a period of time waiting for him to bring the empty cars in, and so I would sit up there and think about various things and throw raw pieces of coal at a tin can or something.
So you had some sitting time and then some working time in between.
Yeah.
That's kind of a nice gig. What advice would you give to somebody just starting their career today?
what advice would I give someone that was starting a new career up for themselves?
Yeah, starting like somebody young today, starting out their career. What advice would you give them?
Well, it depends a lot upon the person, but I did share a lot of advice and let them know what would be good for them and what wouldn't be. And so I just did share some of my knowledge with them that pertained to them.
Is there any other notable stories from your career as in the Army or working in the coal mines or going to school that you think you'd want to share?
Well, like I say, in the coal mine, between the time that they took the cars out of the mine and brought back the empties, I had to have probably an hour or maybe a little bit longer to wait. And so I did some experimenting, and I would turn my headlight out, and I've never seen such darkness in my whole life as what there was. And so I did little things like that, and I can't remember, just something to take up my time until it came time for me to do my
Look
job.
at the next one. What about your time as a parent? What were some of your proudest moments as a parent or a grandparent?
Well, I never did have to spank my kids. I'd usually just talk to them about various things and what would come of what they're doing, you know, and so I just really enjoyed being a dad and a husband.
What values did you try and teach your children?
Well, I think all of my kids, or ULDS, all of my kids ended up being active in the church. One son went on a mission, and the other one wasn't able to go on the mission, but he did. Oh, I can't remember exactly, but then I would take them with me when I had to go somewhere in the National Guard, if it was where I could just go and we'd come back the same day and everything. And then I'd tell them about what was going on and why. And so only one time I had to spank my one son. And I said, "Son, you can either do this or I'm going to give you a couple of swats." And so he says, "Well, I don't want to do that, but you won't swat me hard, will you, Dad?" And so I says, "Well, hard enough so you'll not want to be spanked again." And so I'd always use my hand. So anyway.
What major world events do you remember, and what major world events do you remember living through that had an impact on you?
I'm sorry, I still didn't.
What major world events do you remember living through?
Event. Well, I was married when I was in the National Guard the last time, and so when I left Korea, North Korea, and then went to South Korea, and then when I left South Korea, I tell everybody that the reason the Korean War started is because I left South Korea, and then the North Koreans knew they were safe to
Safe
attack
to invade.
them. Yeah.
Any other world events? Do you remember where you were when 9/11 happened?
I'm not sure what 9/11 is. I did know, but my mind is not there.
So it was 9/11 was about 25 years ago. It's when the Twin Towers in New York were attacked.
When the what?
The Twin Towers in New York, when the planes flew into them.
Oh, yeah. Now, what was your original question?
Do you remember where you were when that happened?
Oh. No, I really don't. I can't remember for sure.
That's okay. Any other big world events that you remember?
Well, like I said, the Korean War started, and I had nothing to do with it, of course, but I did tell everybody. I told everybody how.
It was your fault.
Yeah, it was my fault because, and of course they got a good laugh out of that.
How would you say society has changed the most since you were a kid?
Say that again.
How has the world changed the most since you were a kid?
Well, here again, my memory's not as good as it should be. But I think it's a lot easier now than it was when we had to go in and teach the different countries how to live in a democratic type government instead of I can't remember the term, but instead of the other. So I think it's gotten better.
What do you think about the internet? Do you think that's had a big change on the world?
You know, I've got a real nice telephone, but I don't know how to use it. And that's, so I would say, yeah, the internet has changed, made a big change on the world.
Well, looking back, what would you say was the happiest time of your life?
Oh, wow. Well, I had a lot of happy times, and you know, I can't even remember my marriages. And you know, this has only been a little over a year that my memory's
Started to.
gone off up on the mountain somewhere.
Well, if you could give one piece of advice to your younger self, what would you tell him?
Well, I think the same thing I told my other sons, that there's two ways that I know of that you can, two choices you got. Either do what you're doing now, which isn't too good, and deciding to be man enough to do what you're supposed to be doing. And so I will try to teach my kids that spankings are not necessary, but sometimes you gotta knock some sense in them by hitting her sit down first or something. But my kids, they're all active and they're all doing real well, and they've got kids of their own and everything, and I see them how they're doing with their own kids, and I can see me doing or teaching them what to do in a lot of cases. Not all the time, but I think they've learned a lot from my wife and I.
Sounds like you're pretty proud of them.
I just, like I said, I had one go on a mission, and the other one was going to, but then he, I can't remember what happened exactly, but he's they're all active in the church and everything, and I'm happy with how they turned out.
That's good. If you could leave a legacy or message for future generations, what would you want to tell them?
To think about what they're going to do before they do it. And sometimes, well, no, I think that's the main thing, is to think about what you're going to do and what some of the results might be if you do one thing, etc. And just remember that just remember that you can't remember. I don't know. I can't answer that question right now. But I like to have them reason out their things before they do them.
Be intentional with their decisions.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's a great piece of advice. That's all the questions I have for you. Do you have anything else you want to share?
Well, I used to have $10 and I could have shared that with you, but
I would have taken it, but
yeah. I'll tell you one thing. I look at my kids now, and I think that's wonderful that they're doing it. I'm glad they're doing it this way and that way, and it just makes me feel good to know that they learned a lot of stuff. And sometimes it surprises me when they choose the right way. Not all the time, because most of the time it is the right way. But I just really feel real good about how they turned out.
well, that's awesome. I'm going to cut the recording here, and I'll